10 Horrifying Facts About America's First Serial Killer, H. Holmes. In the late 1800s, America was expanding at a breathtaking pace. Cities were growing, railroads connected the country, and millions of people were traveling to new places for opportunity. But in the middle of that excitement, one man used the chaos of a booming city to hide something far darker. His name was Herman Webster Mudgett, though the world would come to know him by another name, Dr. H. Holmes. Charming, educated, and outwardly respectable, Holmes presented himself as a successful businessman and doctor, yet behind that carefully crafted image was a man who built his life on deception, manipulation, and murder. Today, he is widely remembered as America's first modern serial killer, a figure whose crimes shocked the nation in the 1890s and continue to fascinate historians more than a century later. Here are 10 disturbing facts about the man who turned an ordinary Chicago building into one of the most infamous crime scenes in history. Number 10. His childhood was troubled. Holmes was born May 16, 1861, in the small town of Gilmanton, New Hampshire. By many accounts, his early life was far from peaceful. Neighbors later described his father as strict and sometimes abusive. Holmes was also reportedly bullied by other children in school. Some stories claim that older boys once forced him to touch a human skeleton in a doctor's office, knowing he was terrified of it. Ironically, that frightening moment may have sparked something unexpected. Instead of remaining afraid, Holmes later developed a deep fascination with the human body. That curiosity eventually led him to pursue medical studies, the first step toward the dark path he would take later in life. Number 9. He started his crimes in medical school. Holmes eventually enrolled in medical school at the University of Michigan in the early 1880s. But instead of simply studying medicine, he discovered another opportunity. At the time, medical schools used real human cadavers for anatomy lessons. Holmes allegedly began stealing bodies from laboratories and morgues. He would disfigure the bodies and stage fake accidents. Then he would attempt to collect life insurance payouts by claiming the victims had died naturally. These schemes helped him pay for school. And more importantly, they taught him something valuable: how easy it could be to exploit the system. It was the beginning of a long career built on fraud, identity changes, and manipulation. Number 8. Holmes lived multiple lives at once. Holmes was not just a criminal, he was also a master liar. Over the years, he used dozens of aliases and created completely different identities, depending on who he was speaking to, and that deception extended into his personal life. Holmes married several women, often without ever divorcing the previous one. In some cases, the women had no idea they were not his only spouse. By the time of his arrest, he had multiple marriages and relationships across different states, each built on elaborate lies. His ability to charm people made it easy for him to gain trust, and sometimes that trust had deadly consequences. Number 7. The infamous murder castle. The most famous part of Holmes' story begins in Chicago in the late 1880s. After opening a pharmacy in the Englewood neighborhood, Holmes began constructing a large building across the street. On the outside, it appeared to be a hotel and commercial property. But inside, it was something far stranger. The building reportedly contained hidden stairways, secret rooms, and confusing hallways that led nowhere. Many rooms had no windows, others could be sealed shut. This eerie structure would later become known as the Murder Castle. It was located just a short distance from the 1893 Chicago World's Fair, an event that attracted millions of visitors from around the world. For Holmes, that meant a constant flow of strangers passing through the city, people who could disappear without immediately raising suspicion. Number 6. His crimes were often motivated by money. Unlike many serial killers, Holmes' crimes were often tied to financial schemes. Insurance fraud was one of his favorite tricks. He would convince acquaintances to take out life insurance policies, sometimes even helping arrange the paperwork himself. In some cases, those individuals later vanished. Investigators eventually discovered that Holmes had been collecting insurance money after their deaths. This mixture of financial scams and violence made Holmes especially unusual among serial killers. To him, murder was often just another step in a carefully planned con. Number 5. The murder of Benjamin Petezel. One of Holmes' most notorious crimes involved a man named Benjamin Petezel worked with Holmes and trusted him as a business partner. Holmes convinced him to participate in an insurance scheme where Petezel would fake his own death so they could collect a payout. But Holmes had no intention of sharing the money. Instead, he killed Petesale and attempted to pass the death off as an accident. That single act would eventually unravel Holmes' entire web of lies. Number 4. 3 children became victims. What made the Petesale case even more disturbing was what happened next. After Petesale's death, Holmes convinced the man's wife to let him travel with several of her children while he arranged financial matters. But the children never returned home. During the investigation, authorities eventually discovered evidence linking Holmes to their deaths as well. The case horrified the public and transformed Holmes from a suspected fraudster into one of the most feared criminals in America. Number 3. His arrest began with an unexpected tip. Holmes might have escaped for much longer if not for one mistake. While serving time in jail for another offense, he told a fellow inmate about one of his insurance schemes. Holmes promised the man a share of the money in exchange for help. But when Holmes failed to pay him, the inmate went straight to the authorities. That tip gave investigators the lead they needed. Holmes was eventually arrested in Boston in 1894 and brought to trial. Number 2. The truth behind the body count. For more than a century, rumors have claimed that Holmes killed as many as 200 people. But modern research paints a more complicated picture. Holmes himself confessed to 27 murders, though several of those victims were later discovered to be alive. Today, historians believe around 9 murders can be confirmed with strong evidence, though the true number may never be known. Much of the exaggerated body count likely came from sensational newspaper reports during the 1890s. Even so, the confirmed crimes alone were enough to cement Holmes' place in history. Number 1. His execution in 1896. Holmes was eventually convicted for the murder of Benjamin Petesale. On May 7, 1896, he was executed by hanging at Moyamensing Prison in Philadelphia. Before his execution, Holmes made one final request. He asked to be buried in a coffin encased in concrete, claiming he feared grave robbers might dig up his body. His request was granted. More than a century later, his grave remains sealed in concrete beneath the earth. Final thoughts. The story of H.H. Holmes sits at the intersection of myth and history. Some of the most sensational tales surrounding him have been exaggerated over time, but the core truth remains deeply unsettling. Holmes was a master manipulator who used intelligence, charm, and deception to hide terrible crimes in plain sight. And in many ways, his story represents the birth of modern true crime in America. A chilling reminder that sometimes the most dangerous people are the ones who appear the most ordinary. If you found this story fascinating, let us know in the comments which details surprised you the most. And if you enjoy exploring the darker chapters of history, make sure to follow the channel for more stories just like this. Until next time, stay curious.